Hi guys, Chris Parkin here. Just going to do a quick video tutorial for those of you totally new to Photoshop. If you've already got a reasonable understanding of it, then don't worry about this too much. And just a quick introduction to myself, as I suspect this will be one of the first videos that you'll see in the course. I'm a member of New Zealand Photographic Society and have my associateship with them. I'm also a member of Rotorua Camera Club and a tutor for SAT. So yeah, it keeps me out of mischief. Thoroughly enjoy the teaching. So I may have you on one of my courses, I may not, but hopefully the videos that you'll find will be useful. The majority of the ones that I've done have been done pretty much as students come across problems within the coursework and to help you out, so please make sure that you're checking them. Read through, or view them and see whether or not there's the information in there to problem solve for you. Hopefully I'll have come across most of the issues that you run into, but having said that, frequently people don't, so this is probably your next best option. Google and simply put Photoshop and then the name of the thing and a quick description of what you're trying to do, and the chances are you'll come up with the description and the error. Of course, you've also got the discussion boards on Blackboard and your tutor as well to be able to be there to help out, but I do suggest that your first point of call is Google, and simply because as you go you will run into different problems, and being able to get that almost instant feedback and being able to problem solve challenges around Photoshop is actually a big part of the learning curve, and I frequently do that. Even if a student contacts me and says I'm stuck on something, then I'll be using Google to try and work out exactly how on earth you've gone wrong. And trust me, there are many ways of doing it, so that doesn't quite work. So don't let it get you down, don't let it get you frustrated, keep going, and keep asking questions and keep exploring. And really, Photoshop is one of those tools that the more you use and the more practice you have, the faster and more fluid and more efficient you get at the whole thing. So alright, let's get stuck into it. First things first, just simply opening an image in Photoshop. Now I'm using Photoshop CC, Creative Cloud, and I'm also using Windows, so for those of you who are Mac users, my apologies. I don't have a Mac, so I can't do the Mac version of this. However, the PDF that you have at the start of the intake, in week 1, has all of the shortcut keys and the translation between Mac and PC. And there are also some really good sticky pads almost that literally stick to your keyboard with all the shortcut keys. And they create those for both Mac and PC, so maybe something that you want to explore getting if you hate trying to memorize the location of shortcut keys and speed your workflow up that way. So anyway, one option is simply open Photoshop and drag and drop your image in, and that will open it up for you. For those of you who have already watched the Adobe Camera Raw tutorial, you'll recognize this picture as the PSNZ calibration screen. So if you haven't, please go and have a look, because it talks about making sure that your screen's calibrated and that you can see all the shades from the difference between 0 and 5% and 95 and 100, and then that means that the chances are we can actually see the same thing that you're looking at on your computer screen when you send it in. For those of you who do a lot of printing, this is going to be different. Some printers you can take this to the printers, get them to print it out, and then recalibrate your screen so that it matches their print. But there's a whole pile of different things in terms of the amount of reflection that a piece of paper gives off. Sorry, my dyslexia is going to get the better of me today, apparently. And to the density of the ink that they put on. All of those will affect your final print. Fortunately for this diploma, you're dealing almost entirely with projected, so projected or screen. So as long as you can see the difference between 0 and 5 and 95 and 100 and all the shades in between, then you're somewhere there. You've got a good start. Okay, so you'll have all your file, new, open, menus under file, and obviously if you don't want to drag and drop, you can click on open, and we'll go to the folder that I happened to have earlier. I now can't find it, can I? Typical, my filing system is, yes, my wife would say a mess, but who am I to argue with that one? So you can select your image and open it from in here, and then it will just open up as a separate tab on here. If however you're wanting to put two images into the same document, drag and drop with one of them already open, and that will then create it as a separate layer. Now you won't be doing this until week 3 or 4, and starting to use multiple layers, but just show you how to do that for now. And probably one of the really useful tools is you can hide it, and click the indicate layer visibility, which is a little eye, and hide it. And now if you click on the background layer, you can then work on the background layer instead. We'll go into layers a little bit further on. So right, so there are a number of presets to working in Photoshop. You have Essentials, 3D, which is automatically set up for dealing with three-dimensional work, Motion, which we're not going to worry about, Painting, again, I'm not going to worry about, but it brings up all your brushes and makes them much easier to get at, all the changes. Photography, which is the one that we're going to be using, and that allows you access to layers and channels and your adjustments layers much faster, and also gives you histogram. And again, the ACR video will go into more about the histogram and how to use it. And then you've got typography, so obviously adding text, which then pops up your text as the predominant piece. Now you can change these around as you go, and simply click and it will bring up the pop-up window, and if you click the double arrow, then it will vanish again. You can also get access to these by just clicking on this side panel here, and it gives you your presets and access to them. You'll notice that it's grayed out at the moment, and that is because I haven't got the actual tool selected, but we'll go on to that in a little while. Okay, so if you ever get stuck on finding stuff, window, and then just go down and have a look, and you can reset it to get back to the original version, and that's covered in the PDF, so I won't double up on that too much. Okay, first tool is your move tool. Now I'm grabbing it, nothing's happening. Why? I can't move it because the layer's locked. And this is the nice thing about Photoshop. It tells you generally why something's not working. And in this case, it's told us that it's locked, and you see this little padlock. It indicates that the layer is partially locked. Now in this case, it can't move around. If we undo the lock, then we can pick it up and move it. And probably the most useful button to find is Control Z, and that will undo one step backwards in the things that you've done. If however you've gone and moved or done two things, you want to hold down Control, Alt and Z, and it will step back multiple times, up to, depending on, usually about 20, depending on how many times what you've set in your options in Photoshop. And we'll go into the history panel a little bit later. We'll skip through the basics at the moment and come back to the history again in a bit. Okay, next option is our selection tools, and you'll find that there are 4 different options here: rectangular, elliptical, single row or single column, and there's your rectangle, and you'll notice that there's a feathering option. Now if you have the feathering option set and then redraw your rectangle, you'll notice that the edges get curved. Now if I go Control X, which is cut, I've just cut out that piece that's selected, and you can see that the edges are, the corners are rounded, but the edges are also feathered as well. So if you ever get that happening, that you're wondering why it's not cut, it's out straight, and it's not a clean cut, check what your feathering is, and you'll have to redo the selection. So we'll cut that out, and you can see it vanishes. This is a good time to point out that those grey and white squares indicate transparency in Photoshop, so there is currently nothing there. If you save it as a JPEG, then it will automatically fill that with whatever the background layer is, so most commonly white, but you can change your background layer default to other colours as well. Let's Control Z and undo that, and Control D is another shortcut, and that deselects everything, so that makes life a little bit easier. And obviously if you want the ellipse, then you can drag and draw that selection, and the nice one with this is to hold down Shift and Alt, and that will allow you to draw a perfect circle. And the same thing goes with the rectangular marquee. If you want a square, then hold down Shift. If you want it to drag from the center, then hold down Alt as well, and that will allow it to be central, so you're picking the center point and dragging it through. Okay, our lasso tools, there's lots of different lassos. There's a freehand option, there is your polygon, which allows you to click different points, and basically you can go along and do a straight line and then click very small increments, large numbers of points, and get something that's fairly close to a curve. Turn my feathering back to 0 again. And you've also got a magnetic lasso tool. Now this is probably one of the most useful options, and that allows you to run along an edge, and providing you're close to the edge, it will pick it up fairly nicely. If however you click the wrong point and you want to back it up, just press the backspace key, and I actually need to backspace all the way to there so that I can then get the edge, and I've done it again, it's grabbed the wrong point, so you can backspace, and then if you want to force it to select a point, you can click. The rest of the time it will fill in wherever it thinks anchor points should go, and that will keep going until we get to the end, and then double click and that will give you your selection. So that's quite an elegant way of doing things, especially when you've got curves and stuff to try and select. So undo that again. Next selection tool is our magic wand tool, and you simply click and it will collect all of the pixels that are a similar color. Now how similar, it depends on what you change your tolerance to. So if you change your tolerance to 5 and select, make it give me a new selection this time, it will pick all of the pieces that it thinks are within 5, a variation of 5, and you can crank that up. It'll whinge at me and tell me that the maximum number is 255, and that is because that's the shade. So white is all of your pixels are white, and the maximum variation you have is 255 between black and white. So that can be quite a useful tool. I tend to use it around the 30 mark. It gives you a decent range of selection. Contiguous means that it will only select those colours that are actually joined up to each other. and show you the difference between that. If we turn it off and we select 40 and 50% grey down here, it's also selected it in here and in the picture because it's all the same layer, so it's grabbing it. And that can be quite a useful tool. Generally I leave mine turned off, turned on to contiguous, so I know that when I select the colours here, it's not going to try and grab the rest of the pixels and end up with pixels selected somewhere else that I didn't expect. Now, having said that, if I want pixels that are here and here selected, what you can do is add to selection. You can change the way that it's going to process the selection. So this one only allows you to select and then make a new selection each time. This one adds to, so it's a bit like our Venn diagrams at school, and every time you click it will add more and more to that selection. If you then realize that you've gone and selected something that you didn't want, you can click the subtract from selection, and that can allow you to remove one piece of selection at a time. And then you also have intersect with selection, so if you click here it will only keep the pieces that were already selected and that selection thinks it's going to have. Tend not to use that one too much, but it can be useful. Okay, quick selection tool, very much like the Magic Wand tool, except this one you hold down the button and you drag, and it will continue to build up the selection as you go. And you've got the option of minusing or subtracting from selection, which you can also do if you hold down the Alt key. So you don't have to actually physically click this, you just hold down the Alt key and drag, and that will do the opposite. Of course, if you've got the Alt key held down already, you then need to go and press the plus to make sure it's behaving itself. Okay, next tool is our crop tool, and that allows literally you to crop your image in Photoshop. Now there's one button that I recommend you don't press, and that's the delete cropped pixels. If you do that, then and you keep working on your image and you hit that magic 20 mark, eventually the history will stop storing those extra crop pixels. You can't go back and you can't change it, whereas if you leave it unticked, you can apply this crop, and then later down the track you can go and do all your other painting in bits and pieces, and when you want to and you realize actually you've made a mess of that crop, you can go back and undo and still keep those pixels there and keep the information. And this is a big thing that I do recommend with Photoshop. If you can do something non-destructively, it's always worth doing in a non-destructive way, because it means that if you realize you've made a mess of something later on, you can always go back and fix it. Once you save it as a JPEG, and that squashes all of our layers down here, and you can't go back and undo it. But we'll get to that in actually now let's go and show you how to do the saving and a couple of bits and pieces. So save, obviously Control S will just allow you to save it, and it saves the image as a PSD file, which is a Photoshop file, so that's fine. I'll just change this so that I know what I'm doing, and that's fine. That's now saved it as a high resolution file. When you are ready to save for handing in, you need to resize your image. Now before you go and resize it, make sure you do a save as, and I'm going to rename mine low res or low resolution, and I'm going to change the resolution on this Photoshop file. But the reason that I'm doing this now is I'm going to, excuse me, sorry about that, I lost my train of thought slightly too. So when you're working in Photoshop, you should be doing everything as high resolution as you possibly can, i.e. however high resolution your original images are, because if you want to print anything later, you need to use a much higher resolution image than what you're going to be sending in to your tutors. So it's a bit of a shame to to do your work, and particularly when you get to portfolios, and realize that having done all that work, you actually can't print them and produce a high quality image because you've rescaled, resized everything. So you're going to save as, so you've got a copy of your high-res file, and then you're going to go and do the resizing. So that is image size, and you can simply type in the number that you need. In this case, the date that I'm doing this, the numbers are 1500 wide with a maximum height of 900. Now for this particular image, because it's panorama, that's fine because we've typed in the 1500 pixels and the height is now below 900. If that wasn't the case, and we type in the width and the height was more than 900, you just simply type in 900 into the height and the width will become smaller, and that will meet the criteria that you need to meet. So that's fine. We can hit OK, and that will then make the actual image a little bit smaller. So next step, we'll keep going down. There's a color picker. And this literally just samples the colors that are in the image. It can be quite useful when you're trying to recolor or color match something, and you can literally just hover over and see what it's looking like. There are different ways of sampling that. A point sample is just picking one pixel, and then obviously the 3x3 average, or 31x31 average, is 31 pixels across. So if you try and pick that edge, rather than it jumping straight between grey and white, it slowly changes as you move across there. Let me show you the point sample version. See, it bounces as you go over that line. So it can be quite useful if you're trying to grab an average colour. Okay, spot heal and all the other healing brushes. We'll go over that in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to skip that for now. And our paintbrush, this one we might as well actually grab out and use. What I'm going to do is create a new layer, which is this button down here, or you can go layer, new, and then new layer. And all that allows me to do is when I paint over this image, it's painting it on this layer and not the bottom layer, so I can turn it off and it goes away. Also quite useful if you then go and add another layer at some other stage. Let's grab our paint selector and we'll grab a yellow from there and paint, and you can paint under things. And this comes in useful when you start doing shadows and we start putting new objects in. The layer order can be quite important. As you can see from my scribble, I'm not a classical artist. I'd much rather be using a camera. Hey, and then clone stamp. Again, very similar to the healing brush tool, and we'll cover that in a little while. History brush we don't use too much at the moment, but again, if you want to go and find out a little bit more about that one, have a Google. And there are some really interesting things that you can do with that tool, but they tend to be for people who are doing more painterly type effects within Photoshop. Okay, the eraser tool, that one is useful. And we'll turn on our layer 1, make sure that we've got layer 1 selected. And this brings me to changing another key tool. On your keyboard you've got the square bracket tools, and if you press those buttons you can change the size of your brush, and then we hold down the button and erase, and we can erase the layer that we're talking about and that we've got selected. There are a couple of other things that we can do with this. This is the size. Once you're in here you can just drag the size across to make it smaller or larger, and the hardness. If you go to 0 hardness you end up with a very feathered look, and if you go to 100% hardness it gives you a very hard edge. You can also change the opacity and the flow rate, and I'll actually go and do those, but let's do them on a new layer with an actual brush. Otherwise it becomes a little bit harder to see what exactly is happening. So there we go. That line is 70 pixels with a hardness of 22. Pull the hardness down so you can see the edges feathered a little more, and take the hardness all the way up to 100, and you lose that feathering but end up with little circles. So if we change our flow rate, it ends up a little bit transparent, but again you can see those circles getting placed. If however we change the opacity, you no longer see the circles there. So each of those have their own different advantages and disadvantages, and you can keep changing them. There are lots more ways of adjusting the brushes, but we won't go into those at the moment. We'll just skip through and keep going. We will cover them at some other stage. So. Okay, next tool is our paint bucket. Now this is really useful if you're wanting to fill a large area. Create a new layer and we'll just fill that. Let's change the color and show you another version. If you click on the swatches down here, and you can scroll through the whole color spectrum here, and then you can change the amount of pigment, or the amount of the blue that's in there versus going all the way to white, all the way to black, or a mix in between, and changing it to a kind of a grey blue rather than a true blue. So let's go back to our blue, and at the moment I have all layers selected, so it's only going to fill up areas that are the same colour, and it's got the tolerance just like the selection tool did before. If however we uncheck all layers and paint in, it will fill up everything that it can see in that layer. Again, it's got the tolerance, so if we shift the tolerance up to 100, and it's still not going to get rid of it for me. What's hiding there? Okay, so sometimes that won't work, and then you can just grab your paintbrush and paint over the piece. So now we've got the whole of that area looking blue. There are other fill tools. The gradient tool is quite a useful one. I'll grab a new layer again and hide this one. And the gradient tool allows you to literally draw a gradient, and you can choose, you can choose which type of gradient you want, whether or not it's the upper colour and the lower colour, which is this one, or the upper colour and transparent, or black and white, or all the way through to having some very interesting preset rainbows. If you change the size of the line that you draw and the angle of the line that you draw, it will change the way that it puts in that colour. So you can end up with a very thin line, or you can end up with a very soft change. So that can be quite a useful tool. If you've got the transparency version, then that will slowly cover up what you're doing, and you can also reverse it. So I'm going to do this again and see it covers a little bit of the top. If I hit reverse, it now will fill up from the bottom, and we've pretty much got rid of all of our blue, all of our background, and we're just entirely blue. So I'm going to delete those two layers. We'll turn them on for a second, and literally just hover over the layer, press delete, and it goes away. And it's no longer sitting there. So next one, oh, there is a 3D material drop tool, but yeah, don't worry about that one until 200 level. Next thing, blur tool, and that literally does as it sounds. We've got layer 3, which has got our red on it, and I'll zoom in so we can see this a little bit more, and it's just blurring the edges of that red, just as if we'd feathered them when we started. Sharpen really does what it says on the lid. It's going to do the opposite of blur. It's going to increase the contrast around the edge. You can see it actually builds up almost a fake edge, and increases when it's increasing the contrast. It makes it redder towards the edge. That can be a bit of a problem. It's easy to overdo it. You can start to see pixels, so just be careful how much you use that one. And lastly, the smudge tool, which again allows you to push the paint around, and that can be quite useful when you're doing shadows and bits and pieces later on in the intake. And also, if you like painting, it's a little bit like getting a slightly wet brush and brushing it across the surface, so you can use that Photoshop in that manner. Okay, dodge and burn tools. Now these are very much like the tools that you would use in the darkroom when you're dodging, or stopping the light from hitting the paper as you're exposing the image, and the burn tool, which is allowing more light to fall on that area, and they have a very similar effect. So the dodge tool makes the image lighter. I'll just turn off all these layers so we can actually see what we're doing, and work on layer 0. So there's your dodge tool that's making the area lighter. Control Z, undo it, and your burn tool, make sure we've got the layer selected. It's going to make the area darker. Now that's a destructive method of doing it. There are non-destructive ways of darkening and lightening your images, and we'll go through those as we go. But hey, introduction to what we're doing, what's available for you. Pen tool. Now these are really clever. I can never quite pronounce the name of the curve. I think Bezier or Bezier curves. Basically, it's a mathematical way of drawing a curve that allows you to change the amount of curve there is just by dragging the corners. Now this comes in really useful when you're wanting to draw lines that are not straight generally, and it can be quite useful when you're doing logos and bits and pieces. But we use them a little bit when if you're trying to select the edge of something. You can then turn this into a selection, or if you're trying to draw around a shape, then that can be quite useful as well. But again, it's something that we'll come across more as we progress through the course. Text tool really does do what it is in the box. It allows you to write text on your image, and you can see that it's produced it as a layer. You can also turn the text 3D, and my computer's probably going to whinge at me. I'm not going to change to doing 3D at the moment, because it will not like me for trying to do video, and it's still going to do it. I'm going to undo that, because I'm not going to try and do 3D at the moment. That'll just get too complicated, and trying to do 3D uses up a lot of RAM. You may find that you need more on your computer, and while I'm videoing it will definitely start causing me issues. Anyway, so in terms of editing the text, if you double click on the layer, it will allow you to then edit the text just as in a normal document. You also have the ability to change all of the standard things in terms of your font size. You can also change how tall versus how wide the font is, and you can change whether or not it's on caps or not. Just make sure that you have the whole of the word selected when you change that, and you can change it from bold and italic and all the other bits and pieces that you'd normally expect. Obviously, for those of you doing 108, you'll go into a lot more detail about the different techniques and tricks that you can use to make that look good. What you do need to remember is when you've finished doing your edit, click the tick button, otherwise the computer will tend to whinge at you. If you want to draw specifically on this text or delete part of it, you're going to have to do something called rasterize it, which is basically turn it into pixels. At the moment the computer program is drawing it as it goes, so you'll need to click rasterize type. What I would suggest you do is duplicate the layer first and then hide that copy, just so that you've got the text sitting there for later if you happen to need it. And then we can go rasterize, and then you can use all your other bits and pieces like your smudge tool and all the other bits and pieces that you would normally, because it's behaving itself as if it was a standard pixels. Of course, having done that, you now can't type or change it if you spot that you've made a spelling error, which is why we've got the second copy of the text there, so you can turn this back on and start again. And then once you've got this text here, there we go, capitalize the word, and you then have to start from scratch and redo all the other manipulation that you want. And because I've got the smudge tool selected and we're on this layer, it won't let me do anything because it's hidden. So to unhide it again, press your I, and now you can see there's a double up over the two. So we can hide the text layer, or pick and choose as we go. Okay, now this set of arrows are for dealing with paths, which give you a little bit of an introduction to when you're drawing with a pen tool, and then you've also got your custom shapes, and they behave in a similar manner. Not something we tend to do a huge amount of work with within the photography. It's more of your graphic design type stuff, but worth knowing that they are there. Hand tool, literally, if I zoom in enough, it allows you to move the picture around. Now there's an easy way of doing that without having to have the hand tool selected. If you've got anything else selected, hold down your shift key and that brings up the hand tool automatically. Zoom key, same thing, hold down Alt and that will give you your minus, but again there's a shortcut key to that, and that is Control and plus, and Control and minus will allow you to zoom in and out as much as you need to without going down to these panels, but they're there if you need them. If you want to access the other color that you've selected, which is on the bottom, you can press this double-headed arrow here and that will change it over. And if you want to go back to the default black and white, click on this piece up here, and that will give you true black and true white to start with. So that's about 40 minutes of me rabbiting on. Hopefully that's given you a very small introduction to the basics of Photoshop and some of the tools that you can have a go. Seriously, I'd recommend have a play with them, start experimenting. You'll be given tasks as you go along in terms of your assignments that will get you much more familiar with the tools, but the more you can play with them and the more you start experimenting, the faster the tasks will go as you progress. And yeah, other than that, best of luck with your studies and hopefully see you shortly. Cheers, bye.